Hello friends and welcome to my new video. Today I'll be talking about a filmmaker who is synonymous with the 70s and 80s popular commercial Hindi cinema. If you think of that period of the 70s and 80s and you think of popular entertainment, you cannot ignore this filmmaker. He may appeal to your sensibilities, he may not. But try as much as you cannot ignore the man. The filmmaker I'm talking about today is none other than Manmohan Desai, the great Manmohan Desai. A filmmaker par excellence, an entertainer par excellence. He was the one who almost single-handedly defined the era of the 70s and 80s commercial, entertaining Hindi cinema. Manmohan Desai really had no equal in the kind of movies he made. He almost created a genre of his own, the Manmohan Desai genre. If you knew you're going to see a Manmohan Desai movie, you knew exactly what you were going for. Your logic system, your rationality, your belief system, everything had to be kept aside, and you would walk into the theater just to be entertained. No questions asked, no logic sought, no sense demanded. You just had to be entertained. That was Manmohan Desai's brand of cinema. To begin with, Manmohan Desai came from a film family. His father, Kikubhai Desai, was a producer, and he ran Paramount Studios from almost the entire 1930s and the beginning of the 40s before it was taken over and converted to Filmalaya. So Manmohan Desai grew up watching stunt films like Golden Circus, Sheikh Chili and others which were produced by his father. And he realized at a very early age that films were primarily for entertainment. That was his philosophy, which he later on put in all his films that he made. He made films purely for entertainment, and he made no bones about it. So, as I was saying, Manmohan Desai came from this film family, and eventually his brother Subhash Desai, who was also a producer, gave him his first directorial break. The year was 1960, and the film was a delightful film actually, and looking back, quite different from the kind of cinema we would associate Manmohan Desai with in his later years. The movie was called Chali and had Raj Kapoor, Nuthan, Rahman and Pran in the lead roles. Chali was a black and white film, and it did reasonably well. It wasn't a super duper hit, but it did well at the box office. One of the main reasons for its success was the brilliant music by Kalyanji Anandji, and Raj Kapoor and Nuthan both performed very well as well. The film was loosely based on White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky, but it had the usual Manmohan Desai touch to it, and it was very well Indianized and made for Hindi audiences. And as I said, Chali was the beginning, the first step of Manmohan Desai to becoming a filmmaker. After Chali, Manmohan Desai made a couple of more movies, which both did reasonably well at the box office. He made Bluffmaster in 1963 with Shami Kapoor and Saira Banu, sorry. And in 1966 came another Shami Kapoor film, Badtameez, which had Sadhna in the lead roles. Now both Bluffmaster and Badtameez did average business at the box office. They weren't blockbusters by any stretch. But Manmohan Desai was gradually coming to his own and making his mark as a filmmaker with these movies. In 1968, he then came out with Kismat, starring Biswajit and Babita. And Kismat too was a decent runner. And it was just a matter of time before Manmohan Desai would really find his ground and, make the kind of movies he was known for. The 70s, the decade began with a super hit, Manmohan Desai's first super hit movie, which starred the then superstar Rajesh Khanna, not just in one appearance but in a double role. And the movie Sacha Jhoota became a huge, huge hit. It was partly due to Rajesh Khanna's box office draw at that time, but also largely due to the fantastic script woven by Manmohan Desai, and it was the beginning of the style of movies which would be Manmohan Desai's forte. Entertaining to the core, nice catchy music, and some superstars starring in them. That was his secret formula for making hit movies, and Sacha Jhoota was one huge, huge hit. It was a bumper hit. Now, following Sacha Jhoota, Manmohan Desai had further successes in films like Bhai Ho To Aisa, which had Jitendra and Shatrughan Sinha in the lead roles, and Rampur Ka Lakshman, which had Randhir Kapoor and Rekha in the lead roles. And they were both big hits. And then in 1973, Manmohan Desai came out with this movie, which even in his later interviews, he often referred to as his most favorite movie, Agalekja, starring Shashi Kapoor, Sharmila Tagore and Shatrughan Sinha in the lead roles. Agalekja was quite an entertaining movie. It was unlike the regular Lost and Found or the Formula films. It was a love story, essentially a love story, but it was told in a very entertaining manner, and it had some absolutely fabulous music by R.D. Burman. But unfortunately, Agalekja flopped, and that would be a jolt to Manmohan Desai, because, as I said, he had mentioned it quite a few times that Agalekja was perhaps one movie which was closest to his heart. Anyway, the journey continued for Manmohan Desai, and in 1974, when the superstar Rajesh Khanna was faltering at the box office with quite a few flops to his name, it was Manmohan Desai who brought him back into the limelight with a super hit Roti, starring Rajesh Khanna and Mumtaz in the lead roles, along with Vijay Arora, Nirupa Roy, Jeevan in supporting roles. Roti was a blockbuster and a typical Manmohan Desai masala movie. And that success, the success of Roti, really led to Manmohan Desai finding his feet in the industry and becoming a director to reckon with. And it would just be a matter of time, a couple of years really, when in 1977, simultaneously at the same time, there were 4 Manmohan Desai films celebrating different jubilees: silver jubilees, golden jubilees, platinum jubilees, and the movies were each one more entertaining the other. There was one, Chacha Bhatija, starring Dharmendra and Randhir Kapoor, which was celebrating its jubilee. There was another film celebrating its silver jubilee, Parvarish, starring Amitabh Bachchan and Vinod Khanna in the lead roles. A very, very clever reworking of Avara, of the debate of nature versus nurture. Parvarish was the second movie celebrating its jubilee. And then there was the unthinkable. If anyone had ever said that he was going to make a movie where the hero would be wearing a skirt and would be wearing a gladiator's dress of ancient Roman times, people would laugh at him. And especially if he was told that the hero was Dharmendra, it would be even more funny. But that's exactly what Manmohan Desai did with the other Jubilee hit of the same year, Dharamveer, starring Dharmendra and Jitendra in the title roles. This was a blockbuster, an absolute golden Jubilee hit from Manmohan Desai, and it had everything. It had friendship, it had rivalry, it had royalty, it had a falcon saving a baby from falling. It had marvelous Manmohan Desai stuff, which only he could show with so much conviction that the audience lapped it up, and Dharamveer was this mighty, mighty hit. I told you that there were four movies in 1977 which were celebrating jubilees simultaneously, all directed by Manmohan Desai. There was Chacha Bhatija, there was Parvarish, there was Dharamveer, and of course, there was the fourth movie, which according to me is the blueprint of masala movies in Hindi cinema. To me, it is the Citizen Kane of masala movies, Amar, Akbar, Anthony. Now, I can actually have an entire episode just on this movie, but to me, it's simply the zenith of Manmohan Desai as a filmmaker. If you were to tell a story of lost and found, this is how you say it. If you want to make an entertaining movie which makes people laugh, which makes people cry, which makes people enjoy, which makes people do everything but think, but use logic, you make an Amar, Akbar, Anthony. An absolutely fantastic movie about three brothers separating at birth and being brought up by people of three different faiths. One turns out to be a Hindu, the other a Muslim, and the third a Christian. And how they reunite with their family in the end. That is essentially what Amar, Akbar, Anthony is about. But I doubt there'll be a more entertaining way of saying this same story. I doubt there'll ever be a more perfect masala movie than Amar, Akbar, Anthony. It's absolutely a fabulous movie, and if anyone doesn't like the kind of movie Manmohan Desai makes and is not a Manmohan Desai film watcher, I would just request them watch Amar, Akbar, Anthony. It should be the only Manmohan Desai film you watch, because not having seen it is missing out on a huge chunk of Hindi commercial entertaining cinema. If you've not seen Amar, Akbar, Anthony, you've not seen a major part of Hindi cinema of the 70s and 80s. It's as crucial as I said, a Citizen Kane or a Pothir Panchali or any of the great iconic landmark movies. Amar, Akbar, Anthony for Hindi commercial cinema is a must. This is an absolute benchmark movie. It created a completely new avenue and a new direction for Amitabh Bachchan, the performer. And as he was often tagged later on as a one-man industry and a one-man show, the beginnings of it are with Amar, Akbar, Anthony. His portrayal of Anthony Gonzalez is where it all started for Amitabh Bachchan. Sure, he was the angry young man, and he had a lot of intensity and a lot of depth in his characters, especially in the Salim Javed movies, which built him up as the angry young man. But Amar, Akbar, Anthony was the movie which just gave the audience the complete package of an entertainer. And it was with this movie that the legendary Amitabh Bachchan Manmohan Desai Association really took off. They did a lot of movies after this, like Sohag and Naseeb and Desh Premi and Coolie and Mard and Ganga Jamuna Saraswati. But Amar, Akbar, Anthony remains a landmark movie in the careers of Manmohan Desai and Amitabh Bachchan, and also in the history of Hindi commercial cinema. It's an absolutely superb movie. And I really have nothing else to add about Amar, Akbar, Anthony other than the fact that it's a must watch. It's a must watch. You must watch it if you haven't. Following the great year of 1977, Manmohan Desai continued with his journey in Hindi cinema and made movies like Suhag and Naseeb and Coolie, and they all met with tremendous success because by then the brand had been built. You know, people knew of Manmohan Desai as the complete entertainer, and when Amitabh Bachchan acted in his movies, they knew they were in for a special ride. And which is why movies like Suhag, Naseeb, Coolie, Mard, despite being of questionable cinematic quality, they all succeeded because people were lapping up anything given by this duo of Manmohan Desai and Amitabh Bachchan. I mean, who could get away by showing some of the most unbelievable and illogical scenes in the history of Hindi cinema? Amar Akbar Anthony had the famous scene of three brothers donating blood and the three tubes uniting to form one tube which goes directly to the mother. I mean, who would even think of such a scene? You know, forget about anything else, but even to conceptualize such a scene was just unimaginable for most people. But Manmohan Desai had the conviction of what would work with the audience and what wouldn't. And he made these scenes with so much conviction that not only did they succeed, but how? You know, where a blind mother regains her eyesight with sparks coming from the statue of a god. It was just, you know, to most people it was completely illogical and laughable almost. But when you went and saw the movie in the theaters and you saw the audience clapping on those scenes, you realize that Manmohan Desai knew exactly what the audience wanted and what would work with them. In Mard, for example, you know, it's by any standards quite a terrible movie, but there were scenes which were unimaginable. I mean, I can't even get into the mindset of the person writing those scenes when a horse in a statue gets life and becomes a real horse and moves away with Amitabh Bachchan's horse, leaving the statue dangling in midair. I mean, it's just unbelievable how he could even convince his actors to do those scenes. But they knew that if Manmohan Desai was convinced about something, he would get it and he would ensure that the audience loved it. And 9 out of 10 times that did happen. And as I said, you know, movies like Coolie and Mard, despite being of very questionable quality cinematically, you know, they did superb business. And you know, people wanted to be entertained. People wanted to go in for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, see good looking heroes, see beautiful heroines, nice songs, and a lot of action, a lot of make believe situations, a lot of feel good situations. And that's what Manmohan Desai gave them. So he made no bones about the fact. He knew that he wasn't making any classic or any great cinema as we know it. But the point he was trying to make is he was entertaining a huge mass of people, and they were surely entertained if the box office figures of all these films are to go by. You know, Dharamveer, Parvarish, Chacha Bhatija, Amar Akbar Anthony, Suhag, Naseeb, Coolie, Desh Premi, Mard. You know, it's just the proof lies in their box office success. And you know, as I said, he defined an entire generation. He defined an entire era of Hindi commercial cinema, which is undeniable. So the greatness of Manmohan Desai, the genius of Manmohan Desai, lay in the fact that he knew exactly the dose of masala to put in his movies that would make them, you know, likable to such a huge number of people. It was towards the end, as the law of averages always catch up, and it was towards the end with movies like Ganga Jamuna Saraswati, which turned out to be his last directorial film, and it flopped because by then, times were changing and people were looking forward to different kind of cinemas, and Amitabh Bachchan had passed his prime as a leading man as well. So the kind of things he got away doing 10 years ago or 15 years ago wouldn't work anymore. And it didn't with films like Ganga Jamuna Saraswati, which flopped. And unfortunately for Manmohan Desai, his career ended with a flop, although in terms of commercial success, he is perhaps one of the most commercially successful directors in Hindi cinema, because the ratio of hits versus flop is hugely in favor of the hits in Manmohan Desai's career. It's unfortunate that his last movie flopped, but he knew when to hang his boots up and bow down. Ill health also perhaps prompted him not to make another movie after Ganga Jamuna Saraswati. He was suffering from a chronic back pain, which would keep him bedridden for most of the times. And unfortunately, at the age of only 57, Man Desai passed away under questionable circumstances. Some said it was suicide, some said it was an accidental fall, but he fell from his ancestral home in Khetwadi in Bombay, and he passed away at the young age of 57. But Manmohan Desai lives on through his cinema, through his wonderfully escapist, illogical, senseless, but so entertaining, so worth the while cinema. He will live on and occupy a very important part in the history of Hindi commercial cinema. Because, as I said earlier in my episode, the 70s and 80s were virtually defined by directors like Manmohan Desai. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and for those of you who are not huge fans of Manmohan Desai, I would just make one request: make an exception and see Amar Akbar Anthony. That's the first film of Manmohan Desai anyone should be seeing, according to me. As for me, I'll hang up now because I'm going to put on the Blu-ray of Amar Akbar Anthony and watch it for the nth time. That's all for this episode. Till the next time, bye for now.